going on, guys? Welcome back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Maddy, and as I've said on Fridays, I'm going to have a guest on, and I'm really excited to bring on today's guest, current NBA play caller for the New Orleans Pelicans, Todd Graffagnini, and my mentor through this industry. When I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about on this podcast and why I felt like it was important and something that had a place in this industry, was really this idea that it's all about human beings and relationships. And that starts with my relationship with Todd Graffagnini going back to 2020 when I got laid off during the pandemic. And right before that, I had been writing about the Saints just to kind of quell my mental boredom. And so I really leaned into that while I had the opportunity to. And as you'll hear in the interview, he read some of my writing and he saw something in me. And when I met him the first time in person during 2020 at the Dat Dog on Frenchman Street, which was really the first time I've genuinely enjoyed being downtown because there was really no one out there. The words he said to me, the belief he had in me, it was really one of the driving forces behind why I moved down to New Orleans and pursued this industry rather than staying in Pennsylvania and not really finding my way through life the way that I was going about it. It's been a bumpy ride for me, and I've taken a lot of different pathways I perhaps wouldn't have expected, but his steadfast belief in me has really carried me through a lot of this. And it really goes back to my notion that life imitates sports. So without further ado, Tulane fans, this one's for you and all the insights that he's had from his time on the sideline at Tulane, which actually started during 1998 when he was down there watching Sean King and that Green Wave team absolutely dominate. All right, I'm very excited to bring in my third guest for Before the Whistle, and someone that was on my mind when I started thinking of who I'd want to have on the show. Without further ado, I present Todd Graffagnini, current voice of the Pelicans and former voice of the Tulane Green Wave. Todd, how you doing?
I'm okay, Maddy. This is a surreal experience, I must admit. Thank you for keeping me in your top 5.
Sounds like we're going back to MySpace. Well, you are largely the reason that I am currently Tulane sideline reporter, but I was following in your footsteps, and I don't think we realized how many parallels our journeys really took. So I know that you started in the booth and then went down to the sideline, and we'll get to that season. But what was the first year that you were on the sideline, working with Tulane, and your first game?
I actually started, Maddy, in 1993. I had done some kind of off the field work for Ken Berthelot. As a matter of fact, putting together the 100-year anniversary of Tulane football video along with Brad Grunmeyer, and spent many an afternoon at Cox Cable out in Harahan, looking at very, very old Tulane football footage and just kind of putting together that video along with Brad, and of course Ken Berthelot was the executive producer. But long story short, after that kind of summer in 1993, he asked me if I would like to start, doing games up in the booth with him as a spotter, just to be there. And obviously I accepted. And the first Tulane football game I was ever a part of, as a part of the broadcast team, was at Legion Field, Birmingham, Alabama, 1993, against the defending national champion Alabama Crimson Tide. And 85,000 were in the stadium that day, and the Green Wave made a very good account of themselves. Actually, I believe only lost by a touchdown. And Gerald Soule has a record that still stands to this day, a 98-yard run from left to right. When you're talking about 85,000 people going silent, I mean, think about it. It's first and goal at your own 2-yard line, or first and 10 at your own 2-yard line, going the other way against the defending national champion, and all of a sudden in the third quarter he breaks it and took it to the house, and that was a tremendous experience. But I thought the coolest thing of all, Maddy, was after the game, where we actually had a police escort to the airport. And if you'd have just seen the thousands and thousands of people that were outside of Legion Field that day, you're like, how in the world are we going to get out of here? And of course, they had an escort and got right out and got to the airport. I thought that was the absolute coolest thing that I'd ever been a part of, and not even including the football game. But September in 1993 was when I started doing Tulane football games.
Well, as we talked about, in September 2021, when I started doing Tulane football, my first game actually was also at Legion Field. And I wanted to ask if the elevator worked when you were there, or if it's still been out of service for the 20 years that followed.
Don't even know if there was an elevator back in 1993, but I would assume just off the top of my head, probably had to climb a lot of steps that day.
That you did. And I know that you kind of just walked into the broadcast booth one day and asked Ken Berthelot if you could kind of sit in and watch what he did. What made you want to do that and have that interest in broadcast?
Well, that started on the baseball side of things the spring before. And, I was pretty lucky, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I'm sure he's going to watch or listen to this in the next couple of days, but I really owe a lot to my brother Kyle, who was on the Tulane baseball team at the time in 1992, and that maybe gave me a little in. I was at Loyola. My baseball career was basically over due to injury, and I was a coach on the Loyola baseball team, was a pitching coach, but I was in school for communications, and I had a pretty good idea of that's the kind of direction I wanted to take, especially since I couldn't play baseball anymore. And my brother being on the Tulane baseball team, I'd always wanted, growing up, I'd always wanted to play baseball at Tulane. It just never worked out, and I wound up going to Northeast Louisiana instead. But my brother was on the team, and I knew Lanny Van Gilder very well, who was the head SID at the time. And Ken and Lenny would be in the old Perchin Stadium press box, basically separated by a partition from the other radio, whoever was doing radio on the other side. But if there was no other team doing radio, I would actually go up in the press box. Kenny didn't know me from Adam. And I would sit next to Lenny because he knew me. And I would go in the booth and I would literally write little notes and give them to Lenny as like observations for him to say, kind of like being a color guy without being on the air, if that makes any sense. And one day I got up the gumption. I mean, I was just a scared, 21-year-old. Again, Ken Berthelot didn't know me from anyone. And I went up to him and I said, Mr. Berthelot, my name's Todd Graffagnini. I'm a student at Loyola right now. I used to play baseball, still work with baseball. And I want to do what you do. That's literally what I said. And I guess thankfully, again, as I say, he goes, "Oh, you have a brother on the team." I said, "Yes, I do." And so we just started talking, and all of a sudden he goes, "Hey, look, we're doing a game this Friday. You want to come in and sit in for a couple of innings?" And of course, inside my heart's beating out of my chest. No, Mr. Berthelot, I've got other things. Of course, yes, I would love to sit in with you a couple of innings. And that is literally how I started. And I owe everything to him because he gave me the opportunity. And, look, we're sitting here now 30 years later, and a lot of water has gone under the old Mississippi River Bridge since then, Maddy. But yeah, that's literally how things started for me.
Well, and now that you're in the NBA, it's really a full circle moment for you, but you spent a very long time, I think, really soothing the wounds of Tulane fans as you eventually became the voice of the Green Wave. But you did start off first, very much like me, on the sideline. And when I was talking with you, I didn't realize what your first season was. So I'll just kind of let you take it away from here. And the first game that you were on the sideline as a sideline reporter, and what that was like for you.
Yeah, no, we started doing sideline in 1998, and quite honestly, the technology really wasn't there when you're talking about wireless mics, and it was a very primitive type of setup back then. I had been in the booth spotting for Kenny for a number of years. I was the locker room guy, so I'd go down and do post-game interviews, interview Buddy Tevens, and who was the head coach back then when I started. And, the players and everything. So that's really what my first on-air experience was. But then as things started to improve, technology wise, especially, you know, I would start going down to the sideline, and it was a much, much different experience for me than being up in the booth. And I loved every second of it. And I stayed on the sideline really until I got the full-time job in 2007. Other than the Katrina year when Steve Barrios had to miss the year because he was an insurance agent and he was kind of busy during that fall of '05. But every other year I was on the ground, and it was just awesome because you felt like you were a part of it. And you experience things down there that the guy up in the booth cannot see. And you're a very instrumental part of things if you really, really put yourself into it each and every day. And I know we're going to get into your story, but you know, that's what you have to do. And you've got to be able to describe things from down there, but also you need to convey to the listener what the guys up in the booth don't know or can't see. And I just thought going down there was awesome. And then again, after just being down there on the field, you gain the trust of the guys that you see each and every day because you're out at the facility every day. They see you. And then when you're on the sideline for real games, it's no big deal to them to see you wandering around and about, as I know you're very familiar with.
Very aware with, yes. In a job that I think is often seen kind of as that throwaway position, but I very much agree with you where it has such a unique vantage point, and there's things that you can feel down there like momentum and just that kind of gut feeling that things are changing. You know, I felt it very much so in Arlington, Texas, with about 4 minutes left to go. But as many years as you spent with seasons of Tulane football, the first season you were on the sideline was the 12-0 year. And you sent me a video that you had a large part in making and writing. And it really took, I think, seeing the actual footage of some of those games to just understand how dominant that team was and how wild all of these things that happened that had to happen. There are a lot of parallels, I think, to this last year's team, but it just really seemed like they were so unstoppable. Was there a moment for you during that year or a specific game where you realized that Tulane would really make a run at things for that season?
Well, I had an answer for you, but when you were asking me that question kind of towards the end of it, I changed my mind. If you go back, and again, here's the parallel here. If you go back to the first game of the season at one of your favorite venues, Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati, to start that year, you were like, all right, if we get out quickly and kind of put it to this team, I think we got a chance to do something. And it just so happened, and here's one of the cool things again about being on the sideline that year, we knew, because I had gone to practice every day during training camp, pre-camp, that week, we knew that our first offensive play was going to be an end around to Derek Joseph, who had just been signed as a speedy quarterback out of Shaw, but obviously he wasn't going to play quarterback. He was going to be the heir apparent to Sean King. Sean King was the starting quarterback. But Derek Joseph had track speed. And we knew the whole week that he was going to get the ball on the opening play of the season. And sure enough, we're kind of hinting around on the broadcast, you know, and Barrios is going, oh, look, you know, maybe pay attention. Again, we all knew.
Right.
And the first play, they run the end around. Cincinnati had no idea because King's going left. All of a sudden, he comes back right. And 30-yard gain, first play of the season. And we wound up kicking their collective you-know-whats that day in Cincinnati and scored 52 points and really, really never looked back. But if you want to get into it later about what my personal favorite game was, we can do that too.
I mean, there's no time like the present, so you might as well just let the mystery out.
It had to have been Army and West Point. You know, with a chance to win the conference championship, not outright, to clinch at least a tie. And I will never forget this as long as I live. The week before, we were in the Liberty Bowl, which I know you're very familiar with as well, and got up 41-10 against Memphis and wound up winning the game 41-31. Basically took our foot off the gas.
Like the Memphis game last year?
When I went in, it's ridiculous. When I went into the locker room to do interviews and I heard Tommy Bowden talk to the team, you would have thought that they got beat by 50 points. And I'm sitting there going, inside, of course, I'm there, I'm listening to what he's saying, and I'm thinking, my God, you know, when I was a sideline guy, when I was up in the booth with Kenny, and when Buddy Stevens was the head coach, I would be in the locker room and I'd do post game, and I'm thinking, I've been in 11 winning locker rooms in like 5 years. I mean, that's how bad it was. And we're freaking 8-0. And this guy is unloading. I mean, unloading on the team. And I'm going, oh my, this is unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. Well, the next week was Army. And I would say, Maddy, top 3 games I've ever witnessed in person. No team could stop the other. And we forced a fumble late third quarter. Brett Timmons forced a fumble. We got an extra possession, of course, scored, and won by 14 points, 49-35. And again, one of the great games I've ever witnessed in person. And of course, clinched the conference championship that day. But you throw on top of the historical fact that Sean King became the 4th player in the history of college football to throw for 300 yards and rush for 100 yards in the same game. He threw for 3 touchdowns and ran for 3 touchdowns. Again, it's a feat that can happen a lot more nowadays just because of the way the offenses are set up. But back then, that was unheard of. It didn't happen. It was the 4th time in the history of college football that it happened. And I just go back to that just undressing, no pun intended, in the locker room in Memphis of the team and how they responded after that with one of the greatest games I've ever witnessed.
Yeah, I didn't realize how prolific really that offense was under Tommy Bowden and Rich Rodriguez, but it really, you know, they didn't have a Tajay Spears on the team. They had Sean King. And even just, again, watching those limited clips, watching what he was able to do, you know, on the fly and improvise when things went wrong, like when he bobbled a snap and ends up throwing a touchdown, and it doesn't even look like he looked up for a second. What did it feel like watching Sean King from the sideline? Because when I was there at the Cotton Bowl watching Caleb Williams, I just kept having these moments of, I'm witnessing greatness. It might be on the other team, but I don't think I've really seen a quarterback move like this. And what I, again, saw limited from Sean King really just blew me away. So talking about how different things feel from the sideline, what did that feel like watching King?
Yeah, no, it was awesome. I mean, because you knew that he was going to make a play. If a play had to be made, he was going to make it. And I just thought it was the perfect marriage of scheme and quarterback. What Rich Rodriguez and Tommy Bowden did, they were so far ahead of their time, and Rich Rodriguez especially, so far ahead of his time with that offense. And when you had that guy running it, that's why the Green Wave was the second in the nation in scoring. I mean, can you imagine that? That's you're hanging 45 pretty much every game. I mean, minimum. But what was really underrated about Sean was, by the way, he finished first in the NCAA in efficiency that year, and actually set a record, set an NC2A record for passing efficiency that season. He was deadly accurate. He could throw the deep ball. He could throw the short ball. But the underrated thing was his ability to run. And that's what really, really made that offense unstoppable. Because on third down, if nobody was open, he would tuck it up and go and get the first down more often than not And that's, as you know, in football, to give up those third down conversions when you've got everything you feel covered, and then the quarterback bails them out by scrambling for a first down, that is as we say in the business, a deflator. And we saw that very often that year. Really the year before too in 97, but it was just such a perfect storm in 1998 when you had that guy running that system with the weapons around him. It was incredible. It was incredible.
Yeah, and they started really this run of great Tulane quarterbacks that I think unfortunately went under the radar because of the lack of success on the team. But I actually remember back in 2020 when we met to kind of go into that topic, but you had called me one time and said, hey, turn the Tulane game on. There's this kid named Michael Pratt playing out there, and I think that you might want to pay attention to him. That ended up being very sage advice, seeing that I ended up on the sideline just that next season. But obviously, you were the Green Wave voice for how long? 20-something years? 27?
12 years for football and basketball, 27 for baseball.
There we go. And so you've seen a lot of Tulane football, the good, the bad, and the ugly. What about Michael Pratt made you think that it was something that I should see for myself?
You could tell he was pretty comfortable doing what he was doing, even though I know just from, the last couple of years watching him that he got a late start in the game of football, but you really couldn't tell. And you could just sense that he had it, whatever it is, he had it. And this is again when he had just started playing with regularity. He got an opportunity to play, and obviously he made the most of it because he's still the starting quarterback to this day, obviously with the injuries aside. But he's got the same type of qualities as Sean King did. I mean, he's got great footwork. He's very accurate. And if need be, I know probably going to be more frowned upon this year than it was in the last couple of years, but if he has to pick him up and put him down, he can do that too. And when you've got that type of dual threat quarterback, which he is, you've got yourself something that you can build on. And I know you've talked about it often, Maddy, but this is a year I believe that Tulane is going to really have to depend a lot more on Pratt than they have in the last couple of years without the talent like Tajay in the backfield.
Absolutely. It helps to have a running back like Tajay when you're a coach like Willie Fritz and like to really run the ball into the ground. But I do think there was something about seeing again Caleb Williams in that Cotton Bowl game and realizing how lethal that right quarterback can be. So again, as a sideline reporter, it's something I'm really excited about heading into this year. And really, I have you to thank for being in the position that I am in today. I talk about this business of violence and chaos really coming down to relationships and human beings. And we both know what that's like being on the sideline, but it's really hard to get into this industry, and it doesn't always matter how good you are at something. It's really who you know often. And a lot of the time who you know ends up being a mentor that shows you the way. And I certainly didn't know the way when we met at a Dat Dog in the pandemic during 2020, but you had seen something in me. And I think that mentoring in this industry is just really important to talk about and really the right way to go about it.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, Maddy, because I've been thinking about this. And, this is a very cutthroat, stupid business that I had chosen, and I believe you have chosen it as well. And you got to be a little, crazy in the head to want to get into it. But I just think about what Ken Berthelot did for me. And, when you're in it, it's so competitive because, you mentioned I've been doing the Pelicans now. I just finished my 4th year. If you think on a grand scale, I have one of 30 jobs on the planet. And there are literally 100,000 guys who could easily like walk in and do the job and would, take it in a second. There are a lot of talented people out there that are fighting for limited jobs. And when you get a job like that, it's not something that, hey, I'm going to do this for a couple of years and you skedaddle. No, a lot of the guys that I know now in the NBA have been doing this for 25, 30 years. I've actually got some good friends now that have taken me in, even though I'm just 4 years in, that have been doing this a long, long time. So it's very, very cutthroat and very competitive. And when you're going through it, Maddy, you're not thinking about other people. You're thinking about yourself. Okay. I've got to make a living. I've got to figure out what it's all about. So when you get to a position that I am in now, and I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've written, I've been on I've done TV spots. I've done it all, as I've encouraged you to do. It's a little different when you are able to help someone that has never been in the industry. I mean, I go through guys, that I've kind of helped along the way, like Gus Cattingill and David Kahn and Corey Glore. Well, those guys they're in the business. They're in radio. You had no idea of what A, you were getting into, or B, you had no experience doing it. But I knew just from meeting you and talking to you and reading your writings, the early writings, that kind of made me want to go, all right, you know what? This person has an obvious passion for things. I know she's very, very intelligent. And I think that I could make an impact. And that's really, and it goes back to what Ken Berthelot did for me. And just to see what you have accomplished to this point in just, the short amount of time that we've known each other, it's a testament to you, even though I knew that you had that capability. But it's also personally very rewarding for me, because I feel that I did something constructive with my life and to help someone like you who deserved it. And I said to myself again, this person's got a lot of talent and I want to help her try to get to where she needs to be. And I mean, that's basically, in a, very simplistic way, what all of this has meant to me. And it's just been fantastic to watch you and just to see the smile on your face after the Cotton Bowl and after the UCF game, because again, I know your story, Maddy. You weren't always into Tulane football, and the fact that you're an alum and I have gotten you to now where you're crying after football games, if I had a part of that, then mission is completely accomplished.
Quite fitting that you ended that sentiment that way, because I was just about to say, as much as, again, this is a cutthroat industry and we are told for the most part to take our emotions out of the sport that we cover, I do think it's different when you actually, work with the team versus just writing about them. But, I'm not a very emotional person. We're a little different in that aspect. But yes, I very much surprised myself how much I've tapped into this crying in sports that usually you wouldn't think really should be there. So again, all of these relationships, all of this being important in sports, I think you're really one of the best examples of how important that humanistic aspect is, and using your emotions to channel that passion through people in this industry.
No doubt. I've been really, really lucky. I lasted at Tulane that long. Now, that's to say there weren't a lot of bumps in the road. I've been called to the principal's office often. And there were definitely times where I went home and was like, they're going to fire me. I'm not, it's over. And, I guess I pulled out, but you know what I'm saying? It's just like that. I mean, that's the way it is here. But just to think of all the people that I have met and all the friends that I've, you know, kind of gathered along the way. And it's, you know, a lesson that you just got to think, no matter how bad it gets, you just can't burn any bridges. You got to be very humble and loyal. And I think me being in that kind of realm has helped me along the way. And you know, it's just the people you meet and the friendships you make and the relationships you make. It's everything. It's everything. And it just, it doesn't make any sense to not be a nice person, Maddy. I just, you know, it really doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't know if you've seen that sign, be nice or leave. That's the kind of New Orleans saying, but yeah, I completely agree. Like you said, again, it's a cutthroat industry, but I found that, just as you said, burning bridges only leaves you on one side of the bridge with nowhere to go. Whereas keeping bridges going and really just believing in yourself, I think, and it helps when you have a mentor like you to instill that belief sometimes when you don't believe it in yourself. But it really has just been so inspiring to feel like this and then watch, you know, players that now I've really grown to love and care about chase their dreams in the same way and kind of feel that kindred spirit with them. So I do thank you for, again, that emotional aspect that I wasn't expecting to invoke in this industry.
No, see, you've gotten to the point now where you've been around those guys so long that you're kind of the big sister type. Because look, the hardest thing that I ever had to do when I was doing baseball at Tulane was when my brother Keith was playing in the mid 90s. He played from 95 to 98. Now, my brother Kyle was also on the team. They actually played on the same team in 1995, which was kind of cool. But Keith was a starter from day one. He actually was inducted in the Tulane Hall of Fame last year. So he was a really good player. But when he came in 95, you know, I'm doing the games, and it's like, my goodness, that's my little brother playing first base. And all those guys that he came in with, that was a tremendous freshman class that Rick Jones and Brian Cleary and Jim Schlossnagle had recruited to Tulane. And then all of a sudden, all those guys down the field, all those freshman players that my brother came in with, as the years go on, those are your little brothers too. I mean, some of those games were personal for me. I mean, I'm supposed to be calling, hey, Tulane baseball, but it's like, those are my little bros out on the field. So the hell with you, Louisville. I mean, you know, we're going to kick your you know what. So that was very, very difficult to do, but it was really cool. And I'll share the story with you. We used to have an outdoor press box at Turchin Stadium before they redid it. This is the old ballpark. It was a big wooden thing at the top of the stadium out to the left. So I love doing games outside. I hate sitting in press boxes. I hate it. And I would go outside and sit under, you know, the blazing sun. I'd rather be outside calling games. Well, the cool part about it was 2 rows down, my mom was sitting right in front of me with her headphones on, listening to her son on the radio and watching another one of her sons out in the field. So that is something I guarantee you not a lot of play-by-play guys can share.
No, that's as close as I've heard to the Kelsey brothers story that I think you can get. But yeah, no, it's been very bizarre realizing, that you feel like you've adopted a bunch of guys that it really, I didn't realize it until the draft happened, where it became so random. And talking with Nick Anderson, and just the way that he said your whole career comes down to one day. And then you realize that there's 32 different, or I guess 33 if you don't end up getting picked up, but different pathways that these guys could end up on. And I kind of hit me like a train, to be honest with you. And it still really hasn't hit me yet that one of those guys in Nick Anderson has achieved his dreams and is now signed on the Saints. But it was just such a cool moment to see him in that black and gold uniform on the past Saturday. And it just feels like he could not be a better fit for the team, or really as honestly the ambassador of Tulane football.
I can't say that I'm going to disagree with you on anything you said. I just, the main reason I went out to that mini camp that day was to see Nick Anderson. Now, as you know, we didn't get to see a whole lot. I think we're going to see a lot more when OTAs start next week, but I am pulling for him so hard to give himself a chance to make an NFL roster. I absolutely think he can do it. I know he's got what it takes inside, the physical abilities, he's going to get the most out of what he has. And I just think he's going to set himself up for a lot of success because he's got the attitude for it. And that's the key.
I think it really is all about attitude. Just in this whole mentoring note, there were definitely a lot of times that I could have gotten frustrated in this career path. And it helps, again, to have someone that kind of went through a similar journey as you, have that confidence in you, but you could see that the pathway's there. It just might not be linear or exactly how you wanted it to be. I think we can both relate to that, being, that you were going to be a college baseball player, and then you got in an accident and were no longer a college baseball player. And then you ended up in the press box and went from football, baseball, basketball, and now you're, in the NBA. So I guess what could you say to people out there that might not have a mentor and might think that there's only one way to get into this industry, just to keep them going through that dark end of the tunnel, which you've helped me get through?
Yeah, no, it's not easy. I mean, it is not easy. I've wanted to quit multiple times and basically got talked out of it. And it's frustrating because I don't know why, just Rolling Stones. I mean, you can't always get what you want. I mean, it's true. It's true. And especially in this, where it's ultra competitive. But if you believe it, if you think that this is the path that you want to take, if you firmly believe that, then go for it. And just, I told you this, and here's the thing that people have to understand that are listening to this. It's one thing to offer advice to somebody. It's another thing for the person who has been given the advice to take it constructively, like you have done, and make positives out of things that can be worked on. I mean, I'm still figuring things out too, Maddy, and I've been in this a long, long time. So it's never going to be perfect. But if you firmly believe this is the career path you want to take, then you need to do as many things as possible, whether it be on air, whether it be writing, however way you can get your foot in the door. And the ironic thing is, Maddy, when we first met, it was the article you wrote on the quarterback, the 3-part quarterback, franchise quarterback leave, which was a novel, basically. That's really the thing that I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, this Maddy Hudak, this is when I read that thing, and it took me a long time, and thank goodness it was during COVID when we couldn't go anywhere, because it took that long to read. All I kept thinking when I was reading it, how well done it was, how much research, care, everything was put into writing that piece. And I was like, this is remarkable, because it took me an hour to read it. And I'm thinking, how long did it take her to write this? And that's really what kind of pushed me in your direction. And then when I realized you had gone to Tulane, I'm like, all right, this has to happen. Like I am going to make this happen one way or another. And now you have your own show, and I'm sitting here, as a guest. So yay me.
I'm gonna say it's funny that this started through that writing series, because as we're sitting here on this podcast, you would actually push me to do a podcast later that year
Right.
just to kind of get that experience and that rep. So that is something I just want to add to your comment about not closing yourself off, or even if it's something that you might not think that you wanted to do or don't see a pathway for it in the immediate. You pushed me to do that. I really didn't know about it at the time, and it's very much paying off now when I know how to input audio on things and just do all those little small things, but it really is all the little things that build up. And I think it's a good example in not taking really any experience for granted. And I never saw myself as a podcast person. I thought I was a very introverted only child writer, but you also saw me as a sideline reporter, and here we are. So I also think being open to those pathways from people that know what they're talking about. Maybe it's sometimes, again, they see something in you that you're not seeing in yourself right out.
No, I agree. You need an outside voice, an outside view, because I think, like, even the most confident persons, in my opinion, are always going to have a little doubt. I think some doubt and some, I wouldn't say fear, but, kind of angst. I think that drives people into more success, because it kind of gets you out of your comfort zone a little bit. When they asked me, do you want to do the Pelicans? Well, never in a gazillion years would I ever have thought I would be in the NBA. I always thought I was a baseball announcer, and I was going to, hopefully one day be the voice of the Dodgers. But that's not how things work out. But I knew that I was confident enough in my ability that I had been calling basketball games for 12 years in college. And, even though college and NBA are much, much different games, I knew that I had had enough experience that it wasn't going to be a problem for me. And it really wasn't. It's just a lot faster. And the players are a lot better, and they get paid a whole lot more. That's really the big differences.
That's very fair. I guess you could say that it's all about going 1-0 every single time that you set out to do what you do.
And here you go too, Maddy. I mean, you've got those giant gargantuan rings, and I've got, this lone little 12-0 football ring.
Lone little 12-0. Let's just put that in perspective.
It does say undefeated. It does say undefeated. So I do have that on you. But if I would say that I wasn't jealous of you and Corey and Steve in the Cotton Bowl while I was watching at the Wells Fargo Center in South Philadelphia before the Pelicans played the Sixers, if I said I wasn't a little bit jealous of you guys for the opportunity to be at that game, I'd be lying. I love my job, but I was jealous.
Yeah, Jerry's World was rocking that day, to say the least. But as I came from Philadelphia, when you met me there, we've kind of joked about that being a necessary part of the Tulane voodoo going on that day. So I think all of your still remaining fan base at Tulane thanks you for that deed there in Philly.
Yeah, I guess I had to take one for the team, Madeline.
All right, Graff. I mean, is there anything else that we haven't gone into here?
Talk about this. I mean, the Saints.
Yeah. So again, we didn't really see much in minicamp this week, but I have to admit I'm excited now to see some actual play at quarterback for one in OTAs. But what are you really looking for as something different, I guess, from last year when things weren't working?
Yeah, I didn't really get out to OTAs last year. I think, I'm going to go out to these next couple Tuesdays, definitely. I just really would like to see who's out there, and especially some of the vets. Is David Carr going to be out there? I would hope he would be. Let's edit that one, Grubb. Is Derek Carr going to be out there? Since he's obviously been given the reins to this football team, you got to start building those relationships on the field early on. And, I think it's been a pretty productive offseason for the Saints. and successful OTAs and kind of keep it along because, Maddy, you know, I mean, training camp's going to be here before you know it. And then it starts for real. But I'm just curious to see who is going to be out there participating in these OTAs. And it really is, when you get down to the basis of me and you and our relationship that began back in October 2020, it really started with the New Orleans Saints because of a tweet that you put out that I'm like, now who is this person and why does he think a lot like me? And that was you. But we really started talking regularly, you know, before you moved down here to New Orleans because of the Saints. I mean, our shared love for said organization. So that's really, really the basis for all of this is your Saints love and your superstitions, which I can relate to quite well.
Yeah, I blame my mother for that upbringing of ending up wearing my jersey backwards halfway through that season because I accidentally wore it that way in the first game.
Exactly.
But
it's
as
not
I
superstition, it's ritual oriented. Remember that. Ritual oriented.
Ritual oriented. I am gonna write that one down. I just wanted to say,
I got that from Rick Jones.
From who?
Rick Jones, former Tulane baseball coach.
That is ritual oriented. That is,
yes,
that's golden. But really what I'm looking forward to seeing is almost a little microcosm, I think, of our relationship of mentor and mentee, because I think this is really the first time we're going to see that in a long time at quarterback with Jake Haener and Derek Carr being his mentor. So I think it'll be cool to see that kind of relationship really unfold on the field in a way that just, it's rare to have that opportunity to join your mentor on their team.
No question. And then, you know, you throw the Breeze aspect in it with Haener. I mean, look, we were watching him that day, and you've already made mention of it on your previous pod. That guy stood out. And again, for the limited amount of time that we were able to watch, but you could just tell. And I still need to see that drawing that you didn't put up with the footwork around the padding. But I know you have it.
Oh, I have it somewhere. I could just do a quick little Pictionary moment for everyone.
But to watch Haener's footwork and the way he threw the ball, I mean, just very quick release, almost like he was throwing a dart. And as you could tell, he was just very, very accurate. He made all the throws. He made the throws catchable for the receivers he was working with. So in the brief amount of time, you're thinking, all right, now maybe we've got somebody here who could be the answer long term.
Yeah, when I was going through my show, I was realizing that point about him making the receivers look good, not even really realizing that they were all a bunch of like strangers at that point out there as rookies. And we've seen kind of worse play from more seasoned quarterbacks with the Saints receivers than we did with Jake Haener throwing to a bunch of guys that showed up at the facility the same day as him. But without further ado, this is a version of what I drew featuring Ron Curry with the fancy pool noodle, as I like to call it.
That is a pool noodle shout out, and that is a freaking Rembrandt right there. I mean, that is good stuff.
What can I say? Football drawings are my passion, apparently. But hey, got to remember the sequence of movements when you're doing your reports. Maybe I'll start drawing these figures out for my Tulane sideline reports next season. Yes.
You could add that to your docket, if you will, of things that you need to do on the sideline. But I think you're doing a heck of a job, Maddy, on the sideline. In all seriousness, just to see where you started on that very warm day in Legion Field when you were trying to chase Willie Fritz down, headed to the locker room at halftime, and then to again see you in tears after the Cotton Bowl. You've come a long, long way, Madeline. Long way.
Yeah, I just remember Willie saying, "We're gonna run," and I did not realize how literal we were taking this one. So yeah, that was a very all at once introduction into sideline reporting, including again having to house that entire stadium with no working elevator. And I think that it was until the final hour that we could actually get a signal through. So maybe we could have been just like you in '98 if we weren't able to get that technology going.
Yeah, at least '98 though, we had a lot of wins that we were going to see. Unlike you, which you didn't know at the time, there weren't going to be a whole lot more wins that season.
Nope, just saved them all for the next year. So I'll take that.
No doubt. I think every Tulane fan, wherever they may be, would have taken that trade if been offered, and just to see how many people were in the Cotton Bowl for that game. Goodness gracious, unreal.
When you brought up the 85,000 at Legion Field, I'm just thinking it's not what it was like for us there, but that the amount of people that were at the Cotton Bowl, that was just something I never expected to see.
And again, the parallel to '98, Maddy, and I know we're running out of time, but it was the same way in that Liberty Bowl. It was exactly the same thing. I don't know if there were any Tulane fans in America that it didn't come in to Memphis for that trip. And we took over Beale Street. Now you think about this dichotomy. You've got the Tulane Green Wave, fans coming up from New Orleans who just are looking for no excuse to party. And you're going against BYU, who they don't drink caffeine or smoke cigarettes or do, I mean, like literally.
Right. I just realized that.
Yeah. So to say that Tulane people took over for that week was an understatement. And that was one of the greatest New Year's Eves of my entire life. Walking on Beale Street the night Tulane went undefeated. It was a pretty good New Year's Eve.
My brain is still coming to terms with that, not really realizing how different those two things were, but sounds about as good as my New Year's I spent with the Goodyear Angry Wave tire statue, which I guess would be a close second.
Yeah. I was with Alden Hagedorn at Silky O'Sullivan, so it's kind of the same.
Hey, it's all the circle of life in sports, I suppose. So with that, Graff, I think that's the bottom line for us today, as we always like to say. Thank you again for coming on and for showing me the way in this industry, because I think if I hadn't met you, I probably would still be living in Pennsylvania, and I am grateful to not be doing whatever that might have been and to be on the Tulane sideline as a result. So thank you again for being my mentor and showing me the path.
Thank you for being the greatest mentee I could ever have. And I want to say with all sincerity, I'm just very, very proud of you. You're not a mentee to me anymore. You're family to me. And just to see the success that you have had, and I know the success that you're going to continue to have, it just warms my heart every day. And you made it all worth it, Maddy. I mean, that's as plain as I can put it. You made it all worth it for me to put the effort that I did and to see the effort that you have given me in return. It's priceless stuff. So thank you.
And thank you more. Thank you for basically, again, giving me a dream to chase and making me fall in love with Tulane football, which is probably the most shocking part of it all. Yes, I don't have my rings with me, but I do have my Cotton Bowl.
There it is. I don't have that.
Room.
Yeah, we didn't get any stuff like that in the Liberty Bowl, but I did get a ring. So,
oh, Jerry Jones helps sometimes.
Yes.
But all right, Graff, thank you so much for coming on, and I will see you on Tuesday.
Okay. See you, Maddy.
All right, y'all. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Todd Graffagnini, again, the current NBA play caller for the Pelicans, but the voice of the Green Wave, calling baseball for 27 years, football and basketball for 12 years, has been working there since 1993, the year before I was born. I mean, the amount of time that Todd put into Tulane, the heart and soul he put into Tulane, it still sticks to this day. And it's taught me a lot about how to go about this industry being someone that was very different from Todd coming in to start, not really leaning into my emotions. And we certainly are different in that aspect. We joke about him being the emotional Italian and me being the pragmatic one, but I surprised myself with how much I realized emotions have a place in this industry on the sideline last year. And that might not be the case in every role. It depends on what your relationship is to the team you cover. But working for a team like Todd and I do, it would be a disservice to the players I think you cover to be objective and not care about them as human beings. And I think that goes for everyone in this industry. And really that idea of mentoring, that it's not always about direct competition, because this is such an isolating industry that I think if we all step on each other's heads to get to the top, we're all just going to end up out there with no one to talk to about sports. And I think that whole idea where he found me via my writing, but he saw something in me that put me on a radio broadcast when I never really anticipated that path for myself. Although funnily enough, I have all this background in theater and child acting, and it really actually made perfect sense for me. But I didn't see that pathway for myself, and Todd did. And that's what I think a true mentor is. Someone who sees something in you when you might have lost your way and is always going to be in your corner. And that's really the stories, again, that I want to continue to tell on the show and that I have the ability to tell because of Todd Graffagnini. So that's all for this episode of Before the Whistle. Again, guys, please remember to like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We are now on Spotify with the video versions on YouTube to keep this rolling. But I've really enjoyed this so far. It's been a wild journey in this industry, but this interview really showed how meaningful it's been for me to take this ride. So with that, I will see you guys on Tuesday.